They thought we already knew everything about comets. Frozen relics, drifting through the void, carrying whispers of how our solar system began. But then 3I Atlas appeared and quietly started tearing up every page of that rulebook. If what astronomers are seeing is real, this single object could change how we understand the birth of worlds. So before we go further, make sure you're subscribed, because what you're about to hear may never happen again in our lifetime. It began the way most revolutions in astronomy do, with confusion. A small team at the Vera Rubin Observatory noticed something unusual, a comet that refused to behave like one. The light curve pulsed in measured intervals, as if some internal rhythm were guiding it. At first, they blamed calibration errors. Then the European Southern Observatory ran an independent check using the Very Large Telescope and got the exact same readings. That was the moment people stopped calling it a glitch. Soon, every major space agency pointed an instrument toward 3I Atlas. The James Webb Space Telescope captured infrared reflections that didn't match any known composition metals where only dust and ice should be, heat signatures where there should have been nothing but frozen carbon dioxide. At NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Dr. Stephen Burns described the findings with one line that's now famous among astronomers. 3I Atlas doesn't orbit, it decides. By late October, its acceleration pattern broke standard models. Solar radiation pressure could not explain it, nor could gravitational perturbations. Even when the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics ran simulations using Voyager 1 telemetry and archived Arecibo radar echoes, the numbers wouldn't line up. Something unseen was influencing it. The Keck Observatory tried to trace microjets of vapor, hoping to find conventional outgassing. Instead, they found a faint spiral structure, gas and plasma bending around an invisible core. It wasn't just emitting material, it was organizing it. One astrophysicist compared the pattern to a magnetic containment field. Another joked that if comets had engines, this is what they'd look like when they warmed up. No one laughed for long. Weeks later, Webb picked up a glow, an emerald hue shimmering through the coma like northern lights trapped in orbit. Normally, that color means diatomic carbon, but spectrum scans showed almost none. Whatever was producing that light was not chemical in the way we understand it. That's when the whispers began. Somewhere between the Stanford Radio Astronomy Archives and the Harvard-Smithsonian data pool, someone leaked a term. Coherent signature. Not radio noise, not random static. A repeating pulse hidden deep in the polarized scatter, almost mathematical. Dr. Elena Morales from NASA Goddard called it the hum of structure. She wasn't saying it was artificial. She wasn't saying it wasn't. She was saying that nature doesn't normally hum in binary. Every hour since, 3I Atlas has been rewriting what we thought was possible for small bodies. Its coma now measures nearly half the diameter of the Sun, yet its core remains oddly compact. Estimates range from a few hundred meters to several kilometers. And somehow, despite venting more mass than a typical comet could survive, it remains stable, balanced, alive. The Vera Rubin data now shows a recurring pattern every 16 hours, a dimming and brightening so precise that the signal could be used as a cosmic metronome. Could it be rotation? Could it be a beacon? At ESO, researchers built a model comparing 3I Atlas's spin with known interstellar bodies. The result broke the spreadsheet. a 12% variance that suggests active torque, as if the object is adjusting its orientation. In deep space terms, that's like watching a drifting leaf steer itself upstream. Across the world, observatories keep feeding in their data. The Vera Rubin Array in Chile, the Subaru Telescope in Hawaii, and even small private telescopes joining the chorus. Everyone agrees on one thing. 3I Atlas isn't just a comet. It's a question. And so far, space hasn't answered. As 3I Atlas drifted deeper into the inner solar system, the numbers refused to settle. Every update from the European Space Operations Centre brought more confusion than clarity. Instead of fading as it moved closer to the Sun, its tail grew brighter, sharper, almost sculpted like someone was trimming it with precision. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, orbital analysts recalculated the trajectory for the 5th time that week. The conclusion was unanimous. The motion wasn't random. It was being corrected. Slight bursts of acceleration occurred exactly when its spin axis faced the Sun, as though sunlight itself were triggering a response mechanism. Dr. Stephen Burns described it best in an interview with Science Now. Is greater than, if you gave a comet a mind of its own, this is how it would move, careful, cautious, aware. That quote went viral. Meanwhile, the James Webb Space Telescope caught something else, faint spectroscopic lines that matched no known natural element. The wavelength signatures were too clean, almost like engineered alloys. A speculative paper from the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics proposed that the surface of 3I Atlas might contain crystalline metallic hydrogen, a material only theorized to exist under extreme pressures and never observed in open space. If true, it would mean the object wasn't just alien, it was impossible. At the Vera Rubin Observatory, Dr. Ananya Kumar compared 3I Atlas's reflectivity pattern to Oumuamua's. The ratio between light absorption and reflection suggested the same thing Oumuamua hinted at back in 2017 thin, layered geometry, like a sail. But this time, the data was undeniable. It wasn't a rock, it wasn't ice, it was a structure. And then came the breakthrough from the European Southern Observatory. Using adaptive optics from the Very Large Telescope, they managed to isolate microvariations in the coma's polarization field. The readings formed a pattern, a repeating spiral, consistent with magnetic confinement. Imagine a cloud of charged dust held in shape by an invisible hand. When that data reached NASA Goddard, engineers ran plasma simulations. The results were hauntingly familiar. The shape resembled the magnetic bubble of Voyager 1, recorded in telemetry data as the probe crossed the heliopause in 2012. A self-contained magnetic sheath shielding whatever was inside from solar radiation. By now, whispers turned into headlines. Could 3I Atlas be alive? Not in a biological sense, but alive as a system, a functioning mechanism responding to its environment. The Harvard-Smithsonian team published an emergency paper suggesting it could be a fragment of a larger interstellar vessel, a reactive shard detached from a main body somewhere beyond the Oort cloud. Their reasoning was simple, but terrifying. The energy required to produce its observed acceleration could power an entire planet's worth of propulsion systems. Back on Earth, telescopes everywhere pivoted to track it. Amateur astronomers joined professionals in an unprecedented global collaboration. From the Atacama Desert to Mauna Kea, every night sky camera watched that green shimmer crawl across the black. And yet, The strangest moment came from NASA's Deep Space Network. While tracking routine telemetry from the Parker Solar Probe, an unexplained signal bled into the data. Not noise, not interference. A narrowband pulse synchronized with the exact rotation period of 3I Atlas, 16 hours, 24 minutes. The pulse repeated 3 times. Then it stopped. At first, engineers dismissed it as an internal echo. But when they checked the timestamps, it aligned perfectly with an event Webb had just recorded a flash deep inside the object's coma, bright enough to momentarily outshine an entire quadrant of the sun's corona. Whatever was happening inside that green glow, it was deliberate. When ESA scientists plotted its trajectory, they realized something even more unsettling after passing perihelion. 3I Atlas wasn't exiting the solar system. It was bending inward again, tracing a slow, graceful arc toward Jupiter. No natural object should do that. No comet has ever changed its own escape path. The scientific world went silent. Dr. Burns summed it up in one line at a late-night press conference. Is greater than we're watching the laws of celestial motion rewrite themselves in real time. Within days, the world's leading observatories were locked in synchronized observation. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, ESA's Gaia, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and Japan's Subaru Telescope all turned toward a single point, 3I Atlas, now curving slowly toward the outer gas giants. The object's strange, deliberate motion had shifted it into a trajectory that no natural body should follow. It wasn't falling, it was aligning. The pattern matched something so specific that it sent chills through everyone who saw the data overlay. 3I Atlas's new orbital path mirrored the magnetic equator of Jupiter. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, that discovery set off what one insider described as controlled panic. Why? Because Jupiter's magnetosphere is massive, a bubble of charged particles large enough to engulf the sun itself if it were visible, it's a perfect place to hide or refuel. And that's when things became stranger. The European Southern Observatory detected subtle fluctuations in the surrounding plasma fields, weak electromagnetic ripples that appeared to pulse outward from 3I Atlas like sonar in slow motion. The frequency? Exactly 8.3 millihertz, identical to the Schumann resonance of Earth's own atmosphere. Coincidence? Maybe. But that's the kind of coincidence scientists lose sleep over. In the following days, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory began reconstructing all past data points. A correlation emerged between the object's acceleration spikes and times when Earth's magnetosphere experienced brief, unexplained disruptions. The anomalies were so faint they could easily have been dismissed as background noise until now. Then came the leak. A single paragraph posted anonymously on a research forum claimed that James Webb's NIRC captured something reflecting inside the coma, a shape, not random, not chaotic. It appeared to have symmetry. Webb's infrared depth maps suggested a hollow cavity surrounded by dense metallic layering, like a shell within a shell. The data wasn't released publicly, but word spread fast. Dr. Claudia Meyer, from the Max Planck Institute for Astrophysics, summarized it in one careful sentence. Is greater than, if those readings are accurate, 3I Atlas isn't behaving like a comet because it's never been one. Back at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, a small group of radio astronomers began an independent cross-check using archival Arecibo data. Buried in old frequency scans from 2019, long before the object was officially discovered, they found a faint repeating signature from the same region of the sky. That meant 3I Atlas had been active long before it entered our solar system. And then, as if answering its own mystery, it pulsed again. On a cold morning in Chile, the Vera Rubin Observatory recorded a single bright flash from within its coma, visible for less than 2 seconds. But when analyzed in slow motion, the image revealed something extraordinary, geometric streaks forming perfect concentric arcs, like ripples spreading across a dark ocean. The arcs weren't random. Their spacing followed a golden ratio pattern. Nature loves that sequence, but not in moving plasma. Within hours, ESA's Gaia and NASA's Hubble Space Telescope confirmed it. The flare wasn't an accident. It was patterned energy release, measured, deliberate, symmetrical. For a brief moment, every scientist in the control rooms of JPL, Webb, and ESA realized they were staring at the same thing. A signal written in light. No one dared to call it communication. Not yet. But Stephen Burns, the geophysicist who'd been analyzing the plasma envelope for months, couldn't resist saying what everyone else was thinking. Is greater than, we keep calling it a comet because we don't have a word for what it really is. And maybe he's right. As the green glow of 3I Atlas intensified, its tail started forming sharp angles unnatural in the language of comets. Angles imply direction, purpose. The tail bent slightly toward Jupiter, exactly as if the object were steering itself to intercept the planet's magnetotail. Whatever's inside that coma seems to know where it's going. And for the first time in recorded history, human eyes through glass, steel, and vacuum are witnessing something that might not be moving by physics alone. By the time 3I Atlas neared Jupiter's orbit, every major space agency was watching around the clock. The Deep Space Network, the ESA's ESTRAC antennas, and even India's ISRO telemetry centers were listening for any echo or transmission that could hint at what was really happening inside that glowing anomaly. Then, something happened no one expected. Every spacecraft within 500 million kilometers of Jupiter, Juno, Lucy, and even Voyager 1, far beyond the heliopause, reported subtle magnetic distortions, each arriving in perfect sequence. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, analysts plotted the timestamps. The pulses were too precise to be random. They formed a harmonic cascade, 8 identical bursts, one after another, each spaced exactly 9.2 seconds apart. When they layered those signals over Voyager 1's archived telemetry, the alignment was eerie, a near-perfect resonance with the spacecraft's 1,979 Jupiter flyby signal. That frequency had not been used in decades, and yet here it was again, echoing from a comet that shouldn't even have a transmitter. At first, scientists believed the signal might be a reflection sunlight bouncing off plasma trails. But the phase timing was inverted, as if the source anticipated the arrival of Voyager's relic signal before it even reached the coma. Inside NASA's control room, someone whispered the unthinkable. Is greater than it's replying. When the James Webb Space Telescope locked onto the source, the imagery that came back stunned the world. The green glow around 3I Atlas had intensified to the point of saturation. Within that glow, Webb's mid-infrared sensors traced a faint lattice, an interconnected geometry stretching hundreds of kilometers wide, like filaments weaving a net through space. Each filament shimmered with polarized light, rotating in synchronization with the comet's 16-hour spin. But here's where it turned stranger. The lattice wasn't expanding naturally, it was constructing itself. Spectral analysis from the European Southern Observatory revealed that particles from Jupiter's magnetotail were being drawn into the lattice, rearranging into perfect crystalline chains. It was as though the object were feeding on electromagnetic energy, rewriting its own structure molecule by molecule. Dr. Elena Morales, now leading NASA's Interplanetary Plasma Division, released a statement so cautious it barely concealed her disbelief. Is greater than we are observing a process that appears self-organizing. If these readings are correct, 3I Atlas may be undergoing controlled material evolution. Meanwhile, Juno's magnetometer detected the first measurable energy signature from the object's tail, a directional flux, not radiating outward like a comet, but focused. It pointed directly toward Jupiter's Great Red Spot. When the coordinates were fed through the Keck Observatory's adaptive optics, the picture became chillingly clear. 3I Atlas was positioning itself at the intersection of Jupiter's magnetic field lines, the exact region where charged particles from the planet spiral upward towards space. In simpler terms, it had found a power source. For days, the green glow flared, dimmed, then flared again. Every pulse matched the rotation speed of Jupiter's magnetosphere, as if the two were syncing. The data looked like a handshake. And then, as if choreographed, the glow stopped. Silence. No more pulses, no radio echoes. The object fell into absolute stillness, a perfect, unnatural calm. At first, everyone thought the phenomenon was over. But then, from deep space, Voyager 1, still drifting billions of miles away, sent one final, unexpected transmission. An ultra-weak carrier wave that shouldn't have existed. Its direction, triangulated by the Deep Space Network, pointed exactly toward 3I Atlas. Not away from it, toward it. That meant Voyager's ancient systems designed in the 1,970 seconds, had just responded to something only 3I Atlas could have triggered. The data packets, once decoded, contained no readable message, just repeating numerical intervals perfectly prime. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. The mathematical fingerprint of intention. The signal stopped after the 17th pulse. From that moment on, no telescope, not even Webb, could see inside the object. The coma thickened into a blinding sphere, reflecting nearly all incoming light. The entire system of Jupiter dimmed by 0.1%. For the first time, even skeptics began to whisper the same thought. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it's not alone. For a while, 3I Atlas remained silent. The world, however, was anything but. At the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the night shift had become a permanent one. Engineers slept beside terminals, the blue glow of telemetry reflecting off their faces. They didn't know what they were waiting for, only that something was coming. Days stretched into weeks. the coma's glow fluctuated in rhythm, faint at first, then pulsing like a heartbeat. Every time it brightened, deep space sensors picked up electromagnetic tremors echoing across interplanetary space. At the European Space Agency, spectral data from the Gaia telescope revealed faint chemical traces drifting off the object's surface, molecular hydrogen, traces of xenon, and something else, unidentified isotopic lines, that didn't belong to any known element. Theorists proposed the impossible: quantum-stable isotopes, atoms bound by fields instead of gravity. That alone could change physics forever. Meanwhile, Webb's mid-infrared instrument, MIRI, caught something even more unsettling. Inside the coma's densest region was a perfect void, an absence of energy. When the data was plotted visually, it formed a negative space shaped like an eye, a hollow staring back. Dr. Stephen Burns compared it to a black mirror suspended in green light. His words stuck. Every news outlet repeated them. Across observatories, whispers turned into frantic calls. The shape was rotating. Slowly, deliberately, the Eye of 3I Atlas began to shift its axis toward the inner solar system. At first, scientists thought it was random orientation until the numbers came in. Its axis was aligning exactly with Earth's orbital plane. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, analysts overlaid the motion onto orbital projections. The path matched Earth's position within a margin of error smaller than 1 arcsecond. That kind of accuracy wasn't natural. It was aimed. In Geneva, the CERN Neutrino Observatory picked up faint bursts of neutrino activity synchronized with the object's pulses. Neutrinos don't bounce off anything, they pass through planets untouched. For 3I Atlas to generate detectable ones from hundreds of millions of kilometers away meant an unimaginable level of energy. What was the purpose of the alignment? A message? A measurement? Or something worse? A new probe was hastily commissioned. JAXA, NASA, and ESA collaborated for the first time in a single rapid response mission, Project Kite. The plan launched an unmanned microsatellite using electromagnetic propulsion to intercept 3I Atlas's outer coma before it reached the Jovian magnetosphere. The craft was tiny, just a reflective shell no bigger than a car. But it carried humanity's most sensitive instruments: particle spectrometers, magnetometers, and an optical imager capable of reading a photon's spin. When Kite launched, the world held its breath. 3 weeks later, the first data came in. At 0.6 AU from Jupiter, Kite entered the comet's magnetic envelope, and every instrument shorted simultaneously. Not because of heat or radiation, but because of information. The data stream showed compression levels so extreme that the signal itself seemed encoded. At first, analysts thought it was noise. But once decrypted through machine learning models developed at Stanford's Bracewell Laboratory, the pattern revealed structured repetition, binary clusters forming the number 12 over and over again. 12 rotations, 12 pulses, 12 alignments. That number corresponded exactly to 3I Atlas's orbital shift intervals since entering the solar system. Each time it passed a major planetary field, Mars, Earth, Jupiter, it had released a pulse, always 12 in a set. It wasn't random, it was counting. And as the object's rotation stabilized, Voyager 2, now billions of miles away and decades past its prime, suddenly reactivated one of its long-dormant instruments, the plasma wave subsystem. The last time it had done that was during its Neptune flyby 36 years earlier. This time, the readings were identical to what Voyager 1 detected near 3I Atlas. Identical, but inverted. As if both probes, each on opposite sides of the solar system, were triangulating something unseen between them. When NASA's data analysts plotted the midpoint of that triangulation, the coordinates pointed precisely where 3I Atlas was heading. Something was pulling it, something invisible, possibly vast. And as it moved, every probe in its path began responding as though awakened by an unseen signal. The solar system was lighting up like a circuit board. Within a week of the Kite probe's blackout, something subtle began happening across the solar system. At first, it went unnoticed, a minor data blip in Voyager 1's plasma readings, then an odd echo bouncing off Pioneer 10's old transmitter array. These were ancient machines, long retired, silent for decades. Yet, one by one, they began sending fragmented bursts of data, not commands, not telemetry, just identical fragments of repeating numbers, 12. Every signal, whether from Voyager, Pioneer, or the still orbiting Cassini debris field near Saturn, carried the same numeric fingerprint. It was as though 3I Atlas had awakened a network no one remembered still existed. Inside the NASA Deep Space Network in Goldstone, California, the antennas flickered with overlapping pings. They weren't transmissions from Earth, they were returns, synchronized precisely to 3I Atlas's magnetic pulses. The timing was impeccable, within microseconds. Something, or someone, was orchestrating a symphony of cosmic echoes. As the engineers monitored the cascade, an even stranger phenomenon began unfolding. Satellites in Earth's own orbit, weather probes, retired communication relays, even the long-dead IRAS telescope from the 1,980 seconds started briefly coming online. Not fully operational, just for seconds, enough to ping their last known identification codes. No one had sent a wake-up call, yet these machines were responding to something. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics launched an emergency analysis. They ran cross-correlations between the timestamps of every signal and discovered a perfect geometric alignment, the data mapped into a lattice shape resembling a three-dimensional spiral, stretching from the edge of the solar system all the way inward to Earth's orbit. Every dormant machine, every echo, every pulse, each was a node in this invisible web. And at the center of that web, without question, sat 3I Atlas. Dr. Stephen Burns called it the neural halo. He theorized that if the object was emitting coded electromagnetic patterns, it could be using our own satellites and probes as amplifiers, an interplanetary communication array, powered not by technology, but by memory. The idea sounded impossible, yet the evidence grew stronger each day. Meanwhile, the James Webb Space Telescope, still locked on 3I Atlas from the Lagrange point, began capturing deep infrared imagery unlike anything ever recorded. Through the green and gold glow of the coma, Webb detected microfilament structures, not random dust trails, but deliberate, symmetric bands looping and reconnecting in fractal spirals. The European Southern Observatory confirmed the finding using polarization analysis. The material surrounding 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like ice or gas. It was reorganizing itself in what looked like binary wave interference patterns. In other words, it wasn't dispersing energy, it was storing it. As this revelation spread, panic quietly began to ripple through scientific channels. If the object was accumulating electromagnetic potential, it could be preparing for something monumental, maybe a signal broadcast or an event involving the solar magnetic field. Then came the call from Stanford's Bracewell Laboratory. After reprocessing the compressed kite data, the team discovered a new embedded structure. Not just the number 12 anymore, but a full sequence repeating every 72 bits, 12 sets of 12, followed by 3 words encoded in simple base 6-4, seen, heard, wait, wait. At first, it was dismissed as digital corruption until the checksum matched perfectly across all data packets from Voyager, Pioneer, and Kite. The pattern wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. And then, just as quickly as they had awakened, the probes went dark again. The sudden silence felt heavier than noise. Astronomers across the world were left staring at screens filled with static, waiting for the next pulse that never came. For the first time since entering the solar system, 3I Atlas stopped emitting entirely. The coma dimmed, the electromagnetic hum vanished, and all readings flatlined. It was as if the object had gone to sleep or finished listening. But in the absence of light, the most chilling question remained. If it had been listening, what exactly had it heard? After weeks of silence, something subtle began to shift again, not in the data streams or light curves this time, but in the very fabric of gravity itself. At first, the readings came from Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile. Their deep field lensing models, used to study dark matter distortions, started registering faint anomalies near Jupiter's orbit, warps in background starlight that shouldn't exist. It was as if invisible mass was bending the fabric of space near 3I Atlas. The team assumed an error, a calibration glitch. But when the European Southern Observatory cross-checked using parallax baselines from the Very Large Telescope, the anomaly persisted. The gravitational field in that region was fluctuating softly, rhythmically pulsing in perfect sync with the last known rotation period of 3I Atlas. Dr. Stephen Burns described it as gravity breathing. Meanwhile, NASA's Juno spacecraft, still orbiting Jupiter, began detecting microvibrations through its magnetometer array vibrations that had no corresponding electromagnetic source. The pulses were faint but deliberate, spaced evenly at 12-second intervals. Again 12. As data poured in, analysts noticed something impossible. Each gravitational pulse appeared slightly delayed depending on where the observing station was located. Chile, Hawaii, South Africa all saw the same wave arrive milliseconds apart, as if the signal were rippling through space-time itself. That was when the realization hit. These weren't random gravitational fluctuations, they were gravitational echoes. Reflections off multiple objects, meaning 3I Atlas wasn't alone. Somewhere behind it, another mass was moving, hidden perfectly within its wake, invisible to infrared, radar, or optical imaging. The two were moving as one, their gravitational signatures intertwined like binary stars, but the second object's presence could only be inferred from the way space bent around them. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, simulations showed that this hidden mass wasn't small. Whatever it was, it dwarfed 3I Atlas perhaps by thousands of kilometers. Yet it reflected no light, emitted no heat, and showed no radio return. It was pure gravitational silhouette. Theorists scrambled for explanations. Some claimed it might be a captured interstellar rock hidden behind the comet's coma. Others proposed a rogue black dwarf, a remnant of a dead star, cold and ancient. But there was a pattern the data couldn't hide. The invisible object wasn't drifting freely. It was tracking 3I Atlas. Every tilt, every spin correction, every minor acceleration, the hidden mass mirrored it exactly. And then came an even more haunting discovery. Using Voyager 2's plasma data, still faintly transmitting through the Deep Space Network, scientists reconstructed the magnetic orientation of the region. It appeared that the hidden object wasn't behind Atlas, it was beneath it, locked directly below, as if the glowing green mass were an upper shell, and something far denser, colder, and older was riding underneath like an unseen core guiding the motion. At Keck Observatory in Hawaii, adaptive optics scans hinted at a crescent distortion within the coma, a curved shadow that twisted against the rotation, not with it. In every frame, the shadow stayed perfectly aligned with Earth's direction. It was watching us. That single observation fractured the scientific community. Some insisted it was coincidence, an optical illusion caused by solar backscatter. Others, more quietly, began to admit what no one wanted to say aloud. 3I Atlas might not be one object at all. It could be a system, a shell and a core, a vessel and its anchor. As theories spiraled, the James Webb Space Telescope began collecting low-frequency thermal data in deep spectral mode. The results would take weeks to decode, but early readings already hinted at something chilling heat flux lines that resembled exhaust channels, radiating in perfect symmetry. This wasn't chaos. It was design. For the first time, whispers of the word vessel reached the public. NASA issued no comment. The agencies went silent. Observatories received notice to reroute telescope time. Even the open data feeds from Webb and Hubble went dark, replaced by cryptic placeholders marked under review. In the silence, the internet filled with theories, footage slowed down, images color inverted, shapes drawn and redrawn. Some swore they saw moving panels, others claimed light windows flickering within the coma. But one fact was undeniable. The invisible mass beneath 3I Atlas was moving closer to it, and the two gravitational fields were beginning to merge. Not a collision, a synchronization. And once again, the number 12 returned. 12 pulses, 12 orbits, 12 alignments, 12 steps toward what? When the gravitational data first began to ripple, no one connected it to Earth. The signals were faint, buried under the noise of solar activity. But within days, strange anomalies started surfacing across multiple systems that had nothing to do with space. In Greenland, the geomagnetic monitors at the Danish Space Research Institute picked up unusual fluctuations, small, pulsing distortions in Earth's magnetic north. They were rhythmic, repeating every 12 minutes. At the time, the scientists laughed it off as interference from solar wind. But solar wind doesn't pulse like that. It surges, ebbs, and fades. This was steady, measured, intentional. Half a world away, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Monterey Bay Deep Sea Observatory detected faint tremors on the ocean floor, micro-vibrations, too precise to be tectonic. They came in intervals matching the same 12-minute pulse pattern. Even stranger, their intensity rose whenever 3I Atlas aligned with Jupiter's magnetic plane. No one could explain how something nearly 1 billion kilometers away was making the Earth's crust hum. At the European Space Agency's headquarters, satellite telemetry teams began noticing brief spikes in voltage across multiple constellations. Communications, satellites, weather probes, even old debris trackers experienced small but measurable bursts of energy, as though a global signal was brushing against their circuits. The pattern was identical to the gravitational breathing that had been observed near 3I Atlas. The synchronization was undeniable. Then came the blackout. On October 19th, 4:12 UTC, the Deep Space Network in Madrid lost connection with Voyager 2 for exactly 12 minutes. No static, no interference, no data, just silence. When the signal returned, the transmission contained a timestamp that didn't match Earth's clock. It was ahead by precisely 12 minutes. Whatever was happening, time itself seemed to be bending. Meanwhile, the James Webb Space Telescope sent one final compressed image before its system automatically entered safe mode. The image, later decrypted by teams at Harvard-Smithsonian, showed a faint distortion trailing 3I Atlas like a wake behind a ship. But the wake wasn't gaseous or particulate. It was electromagnetic, twisting the interstellar medium in its path like ripples through water. When rendered in false color, the image showed something no one wanted to believe. An outline vast, curved, and eerily symmetrical. It looked like structure. Dr. Stephen Burns described it carefully in a televised interview. If it's real, it's not debris. It's not an asteroid fragment. The geometry is too precise. It's mechanical. That single word sent shock waves through the world. Mechanical. Governments scrambled to downplay it, but the images had already spread online. Analysts and engineers dissected every pixel, tracing arcs, angles, and shadows. The structure, whatever it was, appeared to be following 3I Atlas like a colossal mirror, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. And as more observatories joined the hunt, the anomaly grew clearer. It wasn't a fragment or an illusion. It was moving and matching 3I Atlas perfectly. At the European Southern Observatory, simulations ran on their exascale cluster in La Silla revealed something deeply unnerving. The object's trajectory wasn't naturally synchronized. It was actively adjusting as if locked in formation. That could only mean one thing: control. 3I Atlas was no longer just a visitor. It was part of a formation, a pair, or worse, a fleet. As all eyes turned skyward, power grids across the northern hemisphere began reporting cascading magnetic anomalies, subtle but synchronized. For 12 consecutive nights, the aurora borealis expanded far beyond its usual boundary, seen as far south as Madrid, Cairo, and parts of Mexico. The light wasn't the usual green shimmer of oxygen excitation. It carried flashes of violet and deep blue, rare wavelengths that usually required massive bursts of energy. Every 12 minutes, the aurora brightened. And then, without warning, a low-frequency radio hum began echoing across the ionosphere. Amateur radio operators picked it up first, a deep, rhythmic tone, just on the edge of human hearing. 12 seconds on, 12 seconds off. It was as though the planet itself was resonating with something beyond it, a harmonic ripple connecting Earth and 3I Atlas through invisible threads of gravity and electromagnetism. Dr. Burns put it simply. We're not just observing anymore, we're inside the experiment. By now, every major observatory on Earth was focused on one point in the sky. 3i, Atlas, and whatever was following it. The public knew something was wrong. NASA had gone quiet. The ESA live streams had been replaced with placeholders labeled Data Calibration in Progress. And the Vera Rubin Observatory, normally open with its nightly sky surveys, suddenly stopped releasing raw imagery. But data has a way of slipping through. In a dim lab beneath the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, a small group of researchers led by Dr. Amina Solheim continued decoding the low-frequency transmissions captured during the auroral surge. They filtered out static, interference, and cosmic background noise. What remained was a repeating pulse buried deep below the audible range. When they sped it up 10,000 times and visualized it as a waveform, the pattern formed something extraordinary, a fractal recursive design almost identical to neural network mapping. "It's not random," Solheim whispered. "It's structured communication, like an echo chamber talking to itself." At first, the team thought it might be interference caused by the solar wind reflecting off Earth's magnetic field. But when they compared it to Voyager 1's plasma wave recordings from 2013, they found near-perfect resonance. It was as though the same voice had been whispering through space for decades, and 3i, Atlas, had simply amplified it. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory confirmed that these frequencies were not natural. They corresponded to intervals used in artificial radio encoding, but the modulation was unlike anything built by humans. It used quantum-level phase shifting, impossible for conventional transmitters. That's when the deep-sea network came online again. Sensors across the NOAA Hydroacoustic Array, designed to detect submarines and volcanic activity, began picking up vibrations not from tectonic plates or undersea quakes, but from the water itself, moving as if responding to an external energy source. 12 pulses. Always 12. The vibrations intensified near deep ocean trenches, Mariana, Tonga, Puerto Rico, places where Earth's crust was thinnest, where electromagnetic energy could resonate more easily. And then, during one of those pulses, something impossible happened. Every atomic clock in the U.S. Naval Observatory lost synchronization just for 12 seconds before snapping back into perfect alignment. The same event was confirmed in Europe, China, and Japan. It was global. Time itself had stuttered. For the first time, the world realized that whatever 3i Atlas was, it wasn't acting alone. It was communicating not with humans, but with the planet. Theorists began proposing an unthinkable possibility, that the object, or the vessel behind it, was using gravitational resonance to test Earth's magnetic stability. Almost like tapping a glass to hear if it would crack. In the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, an emergency night session revealed the coma of 3i. Atlas had expanded dramatically, no longer a faint cloud, but an organized structure forming hexagonal patterns similar to the electromagnetic lattices seen in fusion plasma experiments. It wasn't shedding material. It was assembling something. Inside the coma, Webb's last infrared readings hinted at microstructures, symmetrical frames arranged in spirals, linking and unlinking, like scaffolding. If this was a natural process, it was the most precise natural geometry ever observed in space. Dr. Burns, now visibly shaken during a rare interview, summed it up in one line that spread across the world overnight. If it's not artificial, it's learning how to be. As the nights passed, the lights within the coma intensified. Observatories reported intermittent flares, short, rhythmic flashes like Morse code, only visible in the infrared spectrum. They came in groups of 12. Every 12 flash was slightly brighter than the rest. And with each new flare, the gravitational fluctuations near Earth increased. Oceanic tides rose millimeters higher. The ionosphere vibrated more strongly. Power grids flickered across Canada, Finland, and Siberia. Something was tuning itself as if Earth's magnetic field was being calibrated. All of this led to one terrifying realization whispered in observatory hallways and late-night labs. Whatever was behind 3I Atlas might be preparing to reveal itself. The deeper the telescopes looked, the stranger the images became. 3I. Atlas was no longer just a bright blur against the black, it was evolving. When the James Webb Space Telescope emerged from safe mode and refocused, its first composite image showed a faint lattice-like glow inside the comet's coma. At first, the data team at NASA Goddard assumed it was sensor interference caused by charged particles. But when the European Southern Observatory overlaid their own readings, the lattice appeared again identical down to the micron. 12 concentric layers of light, each perfectly symmetrical. Dr. Amina Solheim, now leading a cross-continental collaboration between Harvard, the Vera Rubin Observatory, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, described the formation as an unfolding geometry. To her team's astonishment, the patterns inside the coma weren't random jets of dust or ice, they were hexagonal, repeating and expanding outward like the petals of a flower opening in slow motion. Across the Pacific, at the Keck Observatory, spectrographic scans picked up spectral lines of unknown origin wavelengths no natural element should emit. They weren't atomic, nor molecular. The light signatures were algorithmic, repeating in sequences reminiscent of digital encoding. The realization was quiet at first. 3I Atlas wasn't just glowing, it was transmitting. 2 days later, the Arecibo Legacy Archive, long dormant since the collapse of its great dish, unexpectedly picked up a signal in its old monitoring band. The data originated from archived receiver nodes still active through secondary uplinks. It contained a short, compressed pulse, one that mirrored the same fractal code found in the auroral frequencies on Earth. Only this time, the signal wasn't coming to Earth. It was being relayed through 3I Atlas outward into deep space. The orientation pointed directly toward the Oort cloud, the distant shell of frozen debris at the edge of our solar system. Dr. Burns summarized the fear no one dared voice. If it's transmitting, that means it's already received something. NASA's internal data networks went silent. The public feeds to Webb, Hubble, and TESS were rerouted through a classified channel labeled DFR32. Even JPL's Voyager tracking portal displayed a maintenance warning that stayed active for 72 hours straight. But one fragment leaked. A single still frame from Webb's infrared sweep captured by a technician before the feed was sealed. It showed the heart of the coma. There, suspended in the center, was a colossal silhouette, not spherical, not jagged, but architectural. Like a cathedral turned inside out, its spires curved inward, spiraling toward a dark hollow at the core. Every 12 minutes, that hollow flashed with a pulse of pure infrared light, bright enough to be seen from lunar orbit. Analysts called it a thermal resonance burst. To others, it looked like a heartbeat. Then came the alignment. On November 7th, the orbit of 3I Atlas crossed the ecliptic plane between Mars and Jupiter, the closest it had ever come to the inner solar system. All major observatories prepared for synchronized imaging, but something unexpected occurred. For exactly 12 minutes, every telescope on Earth, optical, radio, infrared, recorded nothing. The object vanished completely from the sky, as though absorbed by darkness. When it reappeared, its trajectory had shifted by precisely 12 degrees. No known comet could alter its orbit that sharply without external force. Yet there it was, now heading slightly sunward. The gravitational models failed. The orbital equations collapsed. And inside control rooms across the planet, stunned engineers watched as the projected path of 3I, Atlas, began aligning perfectly with the Earth-Sun axis. No one dared speak the word intentional, but it hung in the air, unspoken and heavy. Dr. Solheim, her voice barely steady, whispered what many feared to admit. It's adjusting its course for resonance. For weeks, the scientific community had been silent. Publicly, NASA, ESA, and JAXA maintained that 3I Atlas remained under observation, showing non-gravitational acceleration consistent with outgassing. But behind closed doors, they were looking at something that shattered every model. When the new data arrived from the Deep Space Network relay in Canberra, it showed faint light distortions not near the comet itself but around it. Something massive was bending starlight behind the object. At first, researchers thought it was gravitational lensing, a natural effect caused by mass. But calculations from the Harvard-Smithsonian Astrophysics Data System showed that 3I Atlas wasn't massive enough to produce that much curvature. The bending was too perfect, too uniform. That's when an engineer at JPL, cross-checking data from the Voyager 1 telemetry archive, noticed something bizarre. Voyager 1's instruments over 20 billion kilometers away were experiencing signal noise that pulsed in harmony with 3I Atlas's activity. A pattern, repeating every 12 minutes and 12 seconds. The same signature, the same rhythm. If this was coincidence, it was the most precise one in human history. Back on Earth, atmospheric readings began to fluctuate again. The ionosphere, that invisible shell of charged particles above the planet, was behaving as if something was stirring it from the outside. Radar networks used for tracking meteors began showing phantom reflections, objects that weren't there. And these echoes weren't random. They appeared in 12-minute cycles. By the third week, it wasn't just radar. Astronomers at the European Southern Observatory reported that even ground-based telescopes were detecting microrefractions, tiny flashes of blue and white that appeared in the upper atmosphere and vanished instantly. No aircraft, no satellites, only the sky blinking back like Morse code. Then came the night that changed everything. At 2:14 UTC, satellites orbiting near the moon recorded an enormous distortion, a faint shimmer extending behind the lunar limb, as though the fabric of space itself was being pulled. Every major observatory pointed its mirrors toward the moon. The Vera Rubin Observatory recorded the phenomenon in deep field mode, revealing a thin, translucent arc stretching across space. At its origin, 3I, Atlas. At its endpoint, somewhere just beyond lunar orbit. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't plasma. It was geometry like an invisible structure slowly unfurling. Analysts called it the bridge. The bridge pulsed in sync with a familiar 12-minute rhythm. Each pulse sent a ripple of energy racing through the ionosphere, visible from the ground as ghostly, horizontal auroras, faint lines of electric white light cutting across the night sky. For the first time, every country on Earth could see it. No telescope required. Panic began to spread online. Thousands of videos flooded social media, shaky footage showing the glowing lines crossing stars, vanishing, then returning again. Governments released urgent statements urging calm. Optical phenomenon, they said. Atmospheric refraction. But people could feel it. Compasses failed. Radio stations drifted off frequency. Seismic sensors in Iceland, Japan, and Chile began recording rhythmic tremors, not earthquakes, but gentle, measured vibrations. When mapped together, the tremors formed a network, a global resonance that matched the geometry Webb had seen in the coma of 3I, Atlas. Earth wasn't just reacting, it was synchronizing. Dr. Amina Solheim finally broke protocol and appeared on a leaked live stream. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Whatever's behind 3I Atlas, it's not approaching us, it's aligning with us. She paused, then added, and if it's aligning, it means it's preparing for interaction. Within hours of Dr. Solheim's statement, the world entered a quiet, collective panic. Not from explosions or fire, but from silence. Satellites in low Earth orbit began losing telemetry in intervals 12 minutes apart, just like before. Communications would stutter, reboot, and return. But each time they did, their internal clocks were off by a fraction of a second, as if something invisible had rewritten time itself mid-transmission. The ESA Operations Center in Darmstadt described it as synchronization anomalies, while JPL Pasadena called it clock drift due to solar interference. But neither could explain why every drift followed the same pattern, 12 seconds long, 12 minutes apart. At first, it looked like coincidence. Then the pattern repeated exactly 1,008 times. That number 12 multiplied by 84 matched a constant buried deep in cosmic background readings recorded by Voyager, 1 inch 1,983. Someone or something was leaving fingerprints. Meanwhile, the Vera Rubin Observatory switched to its deepest scanning mode, layering exposures over hours. When they reconstructed the new imagery, they found faint arcs surrounding the object symmetrical, layered like ripples frozen in light. They weren't dust trails. They were frames concentric, translucent rings forming a scaffolding of light. Each pulse from the object seemed to add another ring. By the 12th night, the formation stretched nearly halfway across the distance between 3I, Atlas, and the Moon, an arc so vast that it defied comprehension, a structure no human civilization could even imagine building. Some called it a shield. Others whispered another word, a vessel. But if it was a vessel, where was the command, the movement, the intent? the Hubble spectrograph records finally offered a clue. When light from the structure was refracted through different wavelengths, scientists noticed something shocking, a thin, precise oscillation in the ultraviolet spectrum that matched ancient data patterns once logged by the now destroyed Arecibo Observatory. In 1974, humanity had sent a message into space from Arecibo, a binary map of our DNA, our solar system, our location. Now, 5 decades later, that same frequency, our frequency, was being returned, only altered. The DNA pattern had been rearranged, not randomly, but deliberately. The modified sequence spelled out a repeating molecular ratio, the golden ratio, phi. Humanity had sent a self-portrait into space. Now it was being reflected back, rewritten. The data terrified everyone. It meant one thing: 3I Atlas, or whatever was behind it, had heard us long ago. The Harvard-Smithsonian team began cross-referencing everything: auroral fluctuations, ionospheric tremors, frequency harmonics, and they all converged on one point in the solar system, a region just behind 3I, Atlas's trajectory, a point in the dark where no light returned. Webb was ordered to lock its gaze on that coordinate. For the next 36 hours, it captured thermal gradients that shouldn't exist, heat signatures shaped like metallic petals unfurling in zero gravity. Something enormous was unfolding. And then came the signal. It started faint, like radio static leaking through deep space channels. But within hours, radio observatories around the world began detecting the same pulse. 12 tones, always in ascending order, always ending with a gap of silence, exactly 3.14 seconds long. Mathematicians recognized it instantly. Pi. It wasn't random noise. It was deliberate calibration. The tone moved from radio waves into microwave frequencies, then into optical interference affecting laser communication arrays, fiber optic systems, even military radar. For the first time, humanity was inside an unknown network, and no one knew if it was listening or calling us closer. It began quietly, as most world-changing events do. On December 2nd, the James Webb Space Telescope captured an image that would later be described as the last known moment of silence. A vast shadow had emerged behind 3I, Atlas, not a blur, not a lens flare, but a definite outline. Webb's infrared filters traced the structure's edges across 40,000 kilometers. It wasn't circular. It was engineered. 6 enormous arms extended outward from a central spine, each glowing with faint infrared luminescence. Between them, thin, shimmering filaments crisscrossed like threads of glass. Every few minutes, the arms rotated imperceptibly, and a lattice of light formed in the void geometry so perfect it defied natural law. Dr. Solheim's voice trembled during the emergency briefing at JPL. "The object's size is comparable to our moon," she said. "It's not orbiting 3I Atlas anymore. 3I Atlas is inside it." The comet, or whatever it had been, was now at the heart of something far larger, like a pearl grown around a grain of sand. For the next 12 hours, sensors around the world went silent again. The Deep Space Network registered no reflection, no motion, no temperature. Then, precisely at 3:12 UTC, every magnetometer on Earth spiked simultaneously. From the poles to the equator, Auroras ignited blood-red sheets of plasma cascading across the entire sky. They weren't random this time. They were patterned, vast, repeating arcs forming symbols that no one could decipher. People filled the streets, staring upward. The sky looked alive. At 3:24 UTC, the Voyager 1 spacecraft 23 billion kilometers away transmitted one final data burst before losing contact. The signal contained only 8 bytes of readable data. When decoded, it formed a single phrase in binary. Resonance achieved. Moments later, the bridge that had stretched between 3I Atlas and Earth erupted with light. Not an explosion, an awakening. A ripple of pure energy arced through space, connecting the structure to the moon, then to Earth's ionosphere. Every power grid flickered, every compass spun, every heartbeat quickened. The entire planet's magnetic field synchronized with the pulse. In orbit, the International Space Station crew recorded something impossible. A translucent wave, like a glass tide, washed across the Earth's upper atmosphere, refracting sunlight into iridescent bands. Through those shifting colors, the crew saw faint outlines forming above the clouds, vast hexagonal shadows, each perfectly aligned with the geometry surrounding 3I Atlas. Down below, tidal forces shifted ever so slightly. Oceans bulged outward in rhythm with the pulses, and for 12 breathtaking minutes, the Earth hummed, literally hummed. Seismographs registered a global vibration at 18 Hertz deep, resonant, constant. It was as if the planet itself had become an instrument being tuned. Then came the transmission. The Vera Rubin Observatory detected it first, a narrow-band signal emanating from within the vessel. Every observatory on Earth locked onto it within seconds. The tone climbed steadily, rising beyond hearing, beyond light, into frequencies no human technology could fully decode. When computers reconstructed the waveform visually, it formed a pattern, 12 concentric circles surrounding a single dark point. And inside that point, a symbol, identical to the mathematical representation of hydrogen, humanity's most basic cosmic fingerprint. The signal wasn't random. It was responsive. It mirrored the Arecibo message, answering in kind, molecule for molecule, bit for bit, until finally it transmitted something new. A single pulse, one heartbeat, then silence. In that silence, telescopes around the world recorded a final, breathtaking sight. The structure behind 3I Atlas began to fold inward, its 6 arms collapsing into the core. The glow intensified blinding white before vanishing completely. Where it had been, only a faint blue sphere remained, drifting in perfect alignment with Earth's orbit. And in the vacuum of that disappearance, every receiver on Earth, from deep space antennas to old FM radios, picked up the same whisper. A voice, soft, layered, impossible to identify, speaking in every language at once. Is greater than "we have seen your light. You were not alone in sending it." Then, nothing. The sky went dark. The bridge dissolved, and 3I Atlas, the comet that defied gravity, was gone. For days afterward, the world waited for its return. None came. But high above the Pacific, the Hubble Space Telescope captured one final anomaly. A single, luminous trail moving away from the solar system, accelerating beyond any known propulsion. At its center, faintly glowing, was a small fragment identical in spectrum to 3I Atlas's core. It wasn't fleeing, it was releasing something. A signature, a message, a seed, and perhaps a promise. For weeks after its disappearance, the world waited. Astronomers kept their telescopes fixed on the region where 3I Atlas once glowed, hoping for a trace, a reflection, anything. But there was only silence. No signals, no fragments. Only the faint hum of cosmic background radiation, the same hum we've always lived under, now somehow heavier, fuller. Theories spread like wildfire. Some said 3I Atlas was never a comet at all, but an ancient probe that had finally finished its mission. Others believed it was an artificial seed, planting the blueprint of communication between civilizations. And a few whispered a darker idea, that it wasn't leaving, it was waiting just beyond our reach, measuring what we do next. Whatever the truth is, one thing is clear. The universe isn't silent. It never was. We just weren't listening in the right way. If you're still watching this, then you already know something extraordinary is unfolding above us. And this is only the beginning. So before you go, take a moment, look up tonight. That faint shimmer just above Orion's belt. It might not be a star. It might be the echo of something watching back. Subscribe if you want to keep following this mystery, because when the next signal comes, we'll be the first to decode it together. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.